The Galactic Council meeting hall buzzed with the typical arrogance that came with being the apex predators of known space. Representatives from 12 major species sat around the massive circular table, each one more intimidating than the last. The Krillians with their razor-sharp mandibles clicked impatiently. The towering Vorthak generals flexed their forearms, each capable of crushing steel. The ethereal Nexari floated above their seats, their psychic energy crackling like visible lightning around their translucent forms. At the head of the table sat High Chancellor Thexvor, a Krillian whose black carapace bore the scars of 1,000 battles. His compound eyes scanned the room as he called the meeting to order with a sound that resembled breaking glass. We gather today to discuss the recent territorial expansion into the outer spiral arms, Thexvor announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been questioned. Our scouts have identified several primitive worlds suitable for resource extraction. A holographic display materialized in the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's edge. Small blue dots marked various star systems, each one representing potential conquest. The assembled representatives leaned forward with interest, their various forms of communication filling the air with clicks, growls, and psychic whispers. Most of these worlds contain nothing more than simple carbon-based life forms, continued General Zakthai of the Vorthak military caste. His massive frame dwarfed even the reinforced chair designed to hold his weight. Standard protocol suggests immediate colonization and strip mining operations. The Nexari representative, a being known only as the Whisper, projected thoughts directly into the minds of those present. Its mental voice was like cold wine through empty corridors. The psychic readings from these worlds show minimal intelligence. No technological signatures. No spacefaring capabilities. They pose no threat to our expansion. Thexvor's mandibles clicked in what passed for approval among his species. Excellent. We'll begin with the most resource-rich systems first. He gestured toward the hologram, highlighting several particularly bright dots. These three systems show the highest concentrations of rare metals and energy sources. As the display zoomed in on each target system, detailed information scrolled beside each world. Population estimates, technological assessments, defensive capabilities. All of them read the same. Primitive, defenseless, suitable for immediate occupation. What about this one? Asked Subcommander Volnara of the Hegemony, her serpentine form coiling around her designated space. She pointed with one of her 6 arms toward a smaller, less bright system on the edge of the spiral arm. The energy readings seem unusual. The display shifted to show a small yellow star surrounded by several planets. The third planet from the star glowed with a soft blue light, covered in vast oceans and swirling white clouds. Data streams indicated a world teeming with life, but the technological assessment remained stubbornly low. System designation Terrasol, read Thexvor from the data stream. Primary species, human. Technological level, primitive. Recently discovered atomic energy, but no faster-than-light capability. No energy shields. No plasma weapons. No gravitational manipulation. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the blue glow of the planet. Assessment. No threat. Recommended action. Ignore until more valuable targets are secured. The room filled with what passed for laughter among the various species. The idea that any world could pose a threat to their combined might was absurd. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, each one falling within days or weeks of initial contact. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of anything these primitives could imagine. The humans do show one interesting characteristic, added the Whisper, its mental voice now tinged with something resembling amusement. They appear to form emotional attachments to lower life forms. Our scouts observe them keeping non-sentient creatures as companions. This statement caused another wave of reaction around the table. The concept was so alien to these apex predators that several representatives needed translation matrices to fully comprehend it. They domesticate food sources? Asked General Zakthai, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. Not for consumption, the Whisper clarified. For emotional companionship. They invest significant resources in caring for creatures that provide no tactical or nutritional advantage. Subcommander Vulnera's scales shifted to a darker shade, indicating deep confusion. This explains their low threat assessment. A species that wastes resources on non-functional emotional responses will never achieve true galactic dominance. HFY made a dismissive gesture with his primary manipulation appendage. Mark the Terrasol system for later evaluation. We'll return once the valuable worlds have been secured and processed. A species that coddles lesser life forms will offer no resistance when we arrive. The holographic display shifted away from the small blue world, focusing instead on the resource-rich systems that would fuel the next phase of galactic expansion. The representatives began discussing deployment schedules, fleet compositions, and resource allocation. The conversation flowed with the confidence of predators dividing prey that hadn't yet realized it was being hunted. None of them noticed the small notation that appeared briefly in the data stream before being filed away in the vast databases of the Galactic Council. A single line of text that would, in time, prove to be the most significant intelligence failure in recorded history. Human species exhibits strong protective instincts toward domesticated quadruped designated canine. Emotional bond appears to supersede logical resource management. The meeting continued for several more hours, with detailed plans being laid for the conquest of a dozen worlds. Fleets were assigned, timelines established, and victory was assumed. The representatives departed with the satisfaction of apex predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't kill, conquer, or consume. High Chancellor HFY remained behind, studying the holographic display as it slowly rotated through the target systems. His compound eyes paused briefly on the small blue world at the edge of the spiral arm. Something about the energy readings nagged at his tactical mind, but he dismissed the feeling as irrelevant. After all, what threat could possibly come from a species weak enough to waste precious resources on creatures that served no purpose beyond emotional comfort? In a universe where only the strong survived, such weakness was nothing more than an evolutionary dead and waiting to be collected. The lights in the council chamber dimmed as HFY finally departed, leaving behind the holographic image of Terrasol rotating slowly in the empty air. The blue world continued its ancient dance around its yellow star, unaware that it had just been dismissed as unworthy of immediate attention by the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. In the vast databases of the Galactic Council, the Terrasol system was marked with a simple designation: low priority target, no immediate threat assessment required. It was a mistake that would echo across the stars. Maya-chan had always been different from other 12-year-old girls, though she would have argued fiercely against anyone who suggested she was anything special. She lived in a small apartment above her grandmother's veterinary clinic in the mountain town of Pine Ridge, Colorado, where the air was thin and the nights were filled with more stars than seemed possible. Her best friend was a German shepherd named Atlas, a rescue dog her grandmother had found limping along the highway 3 years ago. The dog had been severely malnourished and bore scars that suggested a hard life before finding his way to their clinic. Most people would have written Atlas off as too damaged, too aggressive, too much trouble. Maya saw something else entirely. Atlas wasn't like other dogs. He was smarter, for one thing. When Maya did her homework at the kitchen table, Atlas would lie beside her chair and watch the pages with an intensity that seemed almost human. He understood complex commands and could open doors, operate light switches, and even fetch specific tools from her grandmother's medical kit. But it was more than intelligence. There was something in Atlas's eyes that Maya had never seen in another animal. A depth of understanding that made her feel like he was truly listening when she talked to him about her fears, her dreams, her frustration with a world that often seemed too small for her rapidly expanding mind. Maya had been building things since she could hold a screwdriver. While other kids played video games, she dismantled old electronics and put them back together in new configurations. Her bedroom looked like a cross between a laboratory and a junkyard, filled with half-completed projects that her grandmother pretended not to understand. The latest project was her most ambitious yet, a communication device based on principles she'd read about in theoretical physics journals that were probably too advanced for someone her age. The device looked like a metal headband covered in blinking lights and thin wires connected to a modified tablet computer running code she'd written herself. "What do you think, Atlas?" she asked as she made final adjustments to the device. The dog sat perfectly still beside her desk, watching every movement with those impossibly intelligent eyes. "Ready to try talking to me properly?" Atlas tilted his head in a way that always made Maya smile. It was his way of saying yes, she'd learned over the years. He understood far more than anyone realized. Maya had spent months studying brainwave patterns, neural interfaces, and something called quantum entanglement that most of her science teachers insisted was impossible to achieve without massive laboratory equipment. She didn't care what they said was impossible. She'd built a particle accelerator out of microwave parts when she was 10, and it had worked perfectly until her grandmother made her dismantle it for safety reasons. The headband was designed to read and interpret neural patterns, then translate them into basic concepts that could be displayed on her tablet. It wasn't true telepathy, Maya reminded herself, just a very sophisticated form of pattern recognition. At least that's what she told herself to avoid thinking too hard about some of the more unusual energy readings she'd been getting during her tests. She carefully placed the headband around Atlas's head, making sure the sensors were positioned correctly against his temples. The dog remained perfectly still, as if he understood the importance of what they were attempting. "Okay, boy," Maya whispered, activating the device. "Just think at me. Think about something simple, like food or going outside." The tablet screen flickered to life, showing a complex pattern of brainwave activity. For a moment, nothing happened except the usual chaos of neural static that Maya had learned to expect. Then, slowly, patterns began to emerge from the noise. The first word that appeared on the screen made Maya's breath catch in her throat. "Home." Alice was looking directly at her, his tail wagging slowly. Maya stared at the screen, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Maya appeared next, followed by safe and family. Tears began streaming down Maya's face as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. Alice wasn't just thinking random thoughts. He was communicating, deliberately and with clear intention. "Thank you," appeared on the screen, and Maya lost all composure. She threw her arms around Atlas's neck, burying her face in his thick fur. "I knew you understood," she sobbed. "I always knew you were special." Atlas remained perfectly still until Maya regained her composure. When she looked back at the screen, new words were waiting. "Not from here," the screen read. "Came long way. Ship broken. Hiding." Maya's scientific mind immediately began racing through possibilities. Ship? Hiding? From where? Others coming appeared next. Dangerous. Hurt Maya. Hurt Earth. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Maya stared at the screen, then at Atlas, whose eyes now seemed to hold depths she'd never imagined. "You believe," appeared on the screen. Maya nodded slowly. "I believe you, Atlas. What others? Who's coming?" The screen filled with text faster than Maya could read it. Descriptions of massive warships, cruel alien races, technologies that could strip entire planets bare in a matter of weeks. Atlas painted a picture of a galactic empire that viewed lesser species as nothing more than resources to be exploited. "They think humans weak," the screen finally displayed. "Mistake. Why is it mistake?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Atlas looked at her for a long moment before more text appeared. Maya built quantum interface with recycled electronics. Maya is 12 years old. Maya's species has potential they cannot imagine. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. If Atlas was telling the truth, if there really was an alien invasion force somewhere out there, then humanity was in terrible danger. And somehow, inexplicably, she might be one of the few people who could help. "What can I do?" she asked. "I'm just a kid." "Not just kid," Atlas replied through the device. "Maya is bridge. Maya sees connections others miss. Maya makes impossible things work." Maya stared at the device in her hands, her mind already racing through possibilities. If Atlas was really an alien, then he would have access to technologies far beyond human understanding. Combined with her ability to make theoretical concepts work with primitive materials, they might actually have a chance. "Will you help?" appeared on the screen. Maya looked into Atlas's eyes and saw not just intelligence, but hope. In that moment, everything changed. She was no longer just a girl with a talent for building things. She was humanity's first ambassador to a larger universe, whether she was ready or not. Yes, she said firmly. Tell me what we need to do. Atlas's tail wagged once, and new text began scrolling across the screen. Technical specifications, energy requirements, and theoretical frameworks that would have challenged graduate students at major universities. But Maya understood. She'd always understood things that others found impossible. As she began taking notes on what would become humanity's first real defense against an alien invasion force, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was what she'd been preparing for her entire life. Every circuit she'd built, every impossible project she'd completed, had been leading to this moment. Outside her bedroom window, the stars continued their ancient dance across the night sky. Somewhere among those distant lights, a fleet of alien warships was making its way toward Earth, confident in their superiority and the weakness of their future victims. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The next 6 months transformed Maya's life in ways she could never have imagined. What had started as after-school projects in her bedroom had evolved into something that would have impressed scientists at NASA if they could have understood what they were looking at. Atlas had been patient in explaining his true nature. He was a scout from a species called the Kethmori, beings who had evolved from pack hunters on a distant world. The Kethmori had been one of the first species conquered by the Galactic Council, but unlike other defeated races, they had been kept alive as tracking animals and war beasts. My people were enslaved, Atlas explained through the ever-improving communication device Maya had built. Forced to hunt other species for council fleets. Bred for loyalty and obedience. Maya's heart broke as she learned about the systematic destruction of Kethmori culture and freedom. The Galactic Council had stripped away their technology, their language, and their independence, turning them into living weapons. But you escaped, Maya said as she worked on modifications to what had once been her grandmother's radio equipment. Not escaped. Sent here AS Scout, Atlas replied. Ship damaged an asteroid field. Crashed. Supposed to report human weaknesses before invasion fleet arrives. And instead you're helping us prepare. Maya showed kindness. Fed me. Healed my wounds. Gave me name. Treated me as family, not tool. The simple statement carried more weight than Maya could fully comprehend. In all his time as a slave soldier for the Galactic Council, Atlas had never experienced genuine care or affection. Maya's simple act of rescuing him and treating him as a beloved companion had awakened something in him that his captors had tried to destroy. Working together, they had achieved things that should have been impossible. Maya's intuitive understanding of complex systems combined with Atlas's knowledge of advanced alien technology had produced devices that operated on principles human science wouldn't discover for decades. The communication array they'd built in the unused barn behind the veterinary clinic looked like something from a science fiction movie. Crystalline structures that Atlas had grown using modified plant nutrients were connected to quantum processors Maya had somehow assembled from smartphone components and microwave parts. The whole system hummed with barely contained energy that made the hair on Maya's arms stand on end. Signal amplification at optimal levels, Atlas reported as Maya made final adjustments to the transmission array. Can now reach other scout ships throughout galaxy. Maya nodded, her focus intense as she calibrated the quantum resonance frequencies. Over the past months, she had learned that Atlas wasn't the only Kethmori scout who had begun questioning their orders. The Council's arrogance had created a weakness they didn't recognize. By treating their enslaved soldiers as mindless animals, they had failed to account for the possibility that kindness and respect might awaken dormant, rebellious instincts. There, Maya said, stepping back from the array. Try it now. Atlas placed his paw on a crystalline interface Maya had designed specifically for Kethmori physiology. The entire array began to glow with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Within seconds, responses began flooding in from across the galaxy. Dozens of Kethmori scouts who had been secretly harboring doubts about their orders suddenly found themselves able to communicate freely for the first time in generations. Brothers and sisters, Atlas transmitted through the quantum link, I have found what we thought lost forever. I have found a species that offers friendship without conquest. The responses came back in a torrent of suppressed emotion and desperate hope. Scout ships stationed throughout the galaxy began reporting their true findings instead of the propaganda the Council expected. Maya listened to the translations with growing amazement as she learned the truth about dozens of species the Council believed they had completely subjugated. They're not as strong as they think they are, Maya realized as patterns began emerging from the intelligence reports. Half their loyal soldiers are only obeying out of fear, not conviction. Fear is a powerful motivator, Atlas agreed. But hope is stronger. Maya spent the next week analyzing the tactical information flowing in from the Kethmori network. The Galactic Council's invasion force was massive, but it relied heavily on intimidation and overwhelming technological superiority. They had never faced serious resistance, because most species surrendered immediately upon seeing their fleet's power. What if we didn't surrender? Maya mused as she studied fleet deployment patterns on her modified computer screens. What if humanity fought back in ways they don't expect? Atlas's response carried what Maya had learned to recognize as amusement. Council expects primitive weapons, kinetic projectiles, and chemical explosives. They do not expect quantum warfare from species they believe barely understand atomic theory. Maya grinned as she pulled up the schematics for her latest project. Then, let's give them something they've never seen before. Working around the clock, Maya and Atlas began construction of what they privately called the Impossible Defense Network. Using principles that combined human engineering ingenuity with Kethmori quantum technology, they created a system that could theoretically protect Earth from invasion. The key was misdirection. Instead of trying to match the alien fleet's firepower, Maya's system would make Earth appear to be something other than what it was. Quantum field generators hidden in satellites would create false sensor readings. Energy dampeners would mask the planet's true technological capabilities. And at the center of it all, a communications hub that could coordinate defensive efforts across the entire planet. MAYA, Atlas said one evening as they worked on the final components. Council fleet will arrive soon. Advanced scouts report Earth defenses are minimal. They plan to demand surrender and expect immediate compliance. Maya looked up from the quantum core she was calibrating. How long do we have? 3 weeks. Maybe less. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. 3 weeks to finish their preparations and somehow convince the world governments that a 13-year-old girl and her dog had built humanity's only chance for survival. We need help, Maya said quietly. I can't do this alone. Not alone, Atlas reminded her through their communication link. Have PAC, KTHMRI scouts throughout Galaxy ready to sabotage Council operations. Human PAC will help too. As if to emphasize his point, Maya heard her grandmother's truck pulling into the driveway. Dr. Sarah Chun had been suspiciously absent from the barn lately, claiming she needed to give Maya space for her science projects. But Maya suspected her grandmother knew more than she was letting on. Maya, her grandmother called from the barn entrance. I think we need to talk. Maya turned to see her grandmother standing in the doorway, flanked by 3 people in military uniforms and a woman in a NASA jacket. Dr. Chin's expression was a mixture of pride, concern, and something that looked like awe. The quantum signatures from your experiments have been showing up on satellites, Dr. Chun said gently. Some very important people would like to know how a 13-year-old girl managed to build technology that's supposedly decades ahead of our current capabilities. Maya looked at Atlas, who wagged his tail encouragingly. The time for secrecy had ended. Now came the hard part, convincing the adult world that their only hope lay in trusting a child and her extraordinary dog. Well, Maya said, taking a deep breath, I guess I should start by explaining that Atlas isn't exactly from around here. The woman from NASA stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the impossible array of crystalline technology surrounding them. Young lady, she said quietly, I think you'd better tell us everything. Outside, unknown to any of them, sensitive instruments on orbiting satellites had detected the first signs of massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the solar system. The Council fleet was ahead of schedule. They had less time than anyone realized. The Situation Room beneath NORAD had been hastily converted into something that looked more like a science fiction movie set than a military command center. Maya's quantum communication arrays had been integrated with the most advanced computer systems on Earth, creating a hybrid network that shouldn't have existed for another century. Maya sat at the center of it all, her small frame dwarfed by the massive screens surrounding her. Atlas lay beside her chair, various Kethmori interface devices attached to specialized harnesses that Maya had designed. Around them, generals, scientists, and world leaders watched in fascination and growing horror as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "The fleet is definitely ahead of schedule," reported General Harrison, the man who had somehow become Maya's unofficial military liaison. "Our deep space monitoring stations are picking up gravitational anomalies consistent with faster-than-light travel. Multiple large objects moving in formation." Maya nodded without looking up from her screens. The past week had been a whirlwind of explanations, demonstrations, and increasingly frantic preparation. Convincing world leaders that a 13-year-old girl had made first contact with aliens had been easier than expected. The technology spoke for itself. KTHMORI Scouts report Council fleet is largest ever assembled. Atlas communicated through the enhanced translation system. 12 species, 47 warships. They expect no resistance. Dr. Sarah Chun, now serving as Maya's advocate and guardian in this surreal situation, leaned over her granddaughter's shoulder. "How many people are we talking about?" Maya's fingers danced across her keyboard as she processed the incoming data. Each warship carries approximately 50,000 soldiers, plus support staff. "We're looking at over 2 million hostile aliens, equipped with technology that could turn Earth into an asteroid field if they wanted to." The room fell silent except for the hum of quantum processors and the soft clicks of Atlas's claws on the metal floor as he shifted position. The magnitude of what they faced was almost incomprehensible. "But they won't do that," Maya continued, her voice gaining strength. "They want Earth intact for resource extraction. They'll demand surrender first, expecting us to cave the moment we see their fleet." "And when we don't surrender?" asked President Martinez, who had arrived by military transport 3 hours ago and still looked like she was trying to process the impossibility of the situation. Maya smiled for the first time in days. "That's when things get interesting." The plan they had developed was audacious to the point of madness, but it was built on a fundamental understanding of the enemy's psychology. The Galactic Council had conquered hundreds of worlds through intimidation and technological superiority. They had never faced an opponent who could match their technology while thinking in completely unexpected ways. "Maya's quantum defense grid is operational," Atlas reported. "Satellite network deployed. Field generators hidden on every continent. Earth now appears to have technology equivalent to Council standards." More importantly, Maya added, pulling up a holographic display that showed energy readings from around the planet, "We can make it appear to have whatever technology we want them to think we have." The quantum field generators Maya had designed could manipulate sensor readings across multiple dimensions. To any observer using Council standard detection equipment, Earth could appear to be anything from a primitive world to a fortress covered in impossible weapons. General Harrison studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent decades planning for impossible scenarios. "So we're essentially running a massive bluff operation. Make them think Earth is more dangerous than it actually is." "Not a bluff," Maya corrected. "Earth really is more dangerous than they think, just not in the way they'll expect." Over the past week, Maya had been working with military engineers and theoretical physicists to weaponize principles that existed only in academic papers. The results were devices that looked like they'd been assembled in someone's garage, but operated on physics that the Council's most advanced computers couldn't predict. "Incoming transmission from Council fleet," Atlas announced suddenly. "They are demanding immediate surrender of Earth government." Maya's screens flickered as the alien signal was decoded and translated. High Chancellor Thexvor's image appeared on the main display, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights of his flagship. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual arrogance of a predator addressing prey. "Primitive beings of the third planet." Thexvor's translated words appeared as text while his actual clicks and whistles echoed through the speakers. "I am High Chancellor Thexvor of the Galactic Council. Your world has been selected for resource extraction and colonization. Surrender immediately, and your species will be relocated to suitable agricultural worlds. Resist, and you will be eliminated." President Martinez looked at Maya, who nodded encouragingly. They had prepared for this moment. "This is Elena Martinez, President of the United Earth Government," she replied, her voice steady despite the surreal nature of the conversation. Earth declines your offer. We suggest you find resources elsewhere. The silence from the alien fleet stretched for several minutes. Maya could imagine the confusion on the Council ships as they tried to process the concept of a primitive species actually refusing their demands. When Thexvor's image returned, his posture had shifted to something that Atlas identified as combat readiness. You do not understand. Your species lacks the technology to resist us. Our weapons can crack your planet like an egg. Maya activated her communication link to the fleet. High Chancellor Thexvor, this is Maya Chun, representing Earth's defense network. Perhaps you should take another look at our technological capabilities before making threats. As she spoke, Maya activated the quantum field generators positioned around Earth. Suddenly, the planet's energy signature changed dramatically. Where Council sensors had previously detected a primitive world with basic atomic technology, they now showed readings consistent with advanced quantum weapons, dimensional shield generators, and energy sources that shouldn't exist. The change was so dramatic that several Council ships immediately shifted into defensive formations. Impossible, came Thexvor's response. Our intelligence indicated primitive technology. Your intelligence was incomplete, Maya replied calmly. Earth has been monitoring galactic communications for some time. We know about your conquest methods. We also know that your fleet has never faced an opponent with comparable technology. Atlas's contribution to the conversation came in the form of tactical data that only a Kethmori scout would know. Details about Council fleet vulnerabilities, command structure weaknesses, and the psychological profiles of various species' military leaders. Furthermore, Maya continued, now transmitting on frequencies that only Council ships could receive, we are aware of the dissatisfaction among your KETHMORI forces. Perhaps you should check your internal communications before proceeding. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the Council fleet, Kethmori scouts began openly questioning their orders for the first time in generations. Years of suppressed resentment and hope suddenly found voice as they realized they were no longer alone. Maya watched the tactical displays as confusion spread through the alien fleet. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly began showing signs of internal conflict. Several vessels actually powered down their weapons as Kethmori crews refused to fire on a species that had shown their kind, genuine respect and friendship. What is the meaning of this? Thexvor's transmission was filled with static as his ship's communication systems struggled with the unprecedented situation. The meaning, Maya replied, her 13-year-old voice carrying across space to reach beings who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, is that your time as bullies is over. Earth offers a different path. Alliance instead of conquest. Friendship instead of slavery. The screens around Maya lit up with incoming signals as other species throughout the galaxy, emboldened by Earth's unexpected resistance, began openly communicating their own dissatisfaction with Council rule. President Martinez leaned over to Maya's ear. Are we really going to be able to pull this off? Maya looked at Atlas, who wagged his tail, and what she had learned was his expression of absolute confidence. We're about to find out, she whispered back, as the tactical displays showed the Council fleet beginning to break formation for the first time in recorded history. The battle for Earth lasted exactly 17 minutes and changed the course of galactic history forever. It began when High Chancellor Thexvor, faced with open rebellion among his own forces and a human species that refused to show proper fear, made the fatal decision to launch a demonstration attack. His flagship's main cannon charged with enough energy to vaporize a small city, aimed directly at the North American continent. Maya had been waiting for exactly this moment. Atlas, activate Protocol 7, she said quietly. The response was immediate and impossible. Instead of the devastating beam of destruction Thexvor expected, his weapon fired harmlessly into empty space as quantum field generators around Earth redirected the attack's energy into temporary dimensional storage. But that was only the beginning. Maya's voice carried across every communication frequency in the system as she spoke words that would be remembered for millennia. High Chancellor Thexvor, you have just fired upon a world under the protection of the Galactic Freedom Alliance. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Galactic Freedom Alliance does not exist, Thexvor replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. It does now, Maya said simply. At her signal, quantum transmitters hidden throughout Earth's solar system activated simultaneously. The message they broadcast reached every oppressed world in the galaxy within seconds, carried by principles of quantum entanglement that Maya had somehow made work with modified satellite equipment. The message was simple: Earth stands with the enslaved. Join us. The response was overwhelming. Across the galaxy, species that had been conquered and subjugated for generations suddenly found their voices. Kethmori scouts abandoned their posts and began seizing control of Council ships. Enslaved populations on mining worlds shut down operations. Even some of the supposedly loyal Council species began questioning orders they had followed without thought for centuries. In the space around Earth, the massive Council fleet began tearing itself apart from within as soldiers realized they had been given a choice they never knew existed. Impossible! HFY transmitted, his compound eyes reflecting the chaos as his own bridge crew began arguing among themselves. You are primitives. You have no faster-than-light communication. Maya smiled as she revealed the secret that would rewrite physics textbooks across the galaxy. We don't need faster-than-light communication when we can make quantum entanglement work with recycled electronics and teenager ingenuity. The theoretical impossibility of what Maya had accomplished was so staggering that several Council species immediately began requesting technical specifications. The idea that a primitive world could achieve quantum communication without massive infrastructure or centuries of technological development challenged everything they thought they knew about scientific advancement. But Maya wasn't finished demonstrating human ingenuity. Atlas showed them what friendship can build. Around Earth, the quantum field generators Maya had hidden in seemingly innocent satellites suddenly revealed their true purpose. Instead of simply masking Earth's technology, they began projecting defensive fields that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. The fields weren't just energy barriers. They were quantum probability manipulators that made attacks against Earth increasingly unlikely to succeed. Weapons that should have fired perfectly began experiencing mysterious malfunctions. Navigation systems started reporting impossible readings. Even basic life support began acting unpredictably on ships whose crews maintained hostile intent toward the planet. How? HFY's transmission was now filled with desperate confusion. Because humans don't just build technology, Maya replied. We build relationships. Alice taught me Kethmori quantum mechanics. I taught him human engineering principles. Together, we created something neither of our species could have achieved alone. General Harrison, watching the tactical displays with amazement, turned to President Martinez. Madam President, I think we're witnessing the end of an empire. He was right. Across the Council fleet, ships were surrendering to their own crews as enslaved species seized control. The Nexari discovered that their psychic abilities worked far better when used to heal rather than dominate. The Vorthak found that their incredible strength was more fulfilling when used to protect rather than destroy. Even the Krillians began to understand that true victory came from building rather than conquering. HFY's flagship was one of the last to fall, as reports reached him of the complete collapse of Council authority throughout the galaxy. The High Chancellor made one final transmission to Earth. What do you want from US? Maya's response would be quoted in history books for generations to come. Nothing. We want to give you something instead. A chance to be better than you were. The formal surrender took place 3 days later in Earth's orbit. Maya insisted that the ceremony be conducted aboard Atlas's original scout ship, which had been lovingly restored by human engineers working alongside Kethmori technicians who had arrived as conquerors and stayed as friends. High Chancellor HFY, his compound eyes dimmed by what humans would recognize as profound humility, knelt before a 13-year-old girl and a German shepherd who had somehow brought down the most powerful empire in galactic history. I did not understand how you knew we could be defeated, he admitted. Maya scratched Atlas behind the ears as she considered her answer. We didn't defeat you. We just showed you that there was a better way to live. The months that followed saw the most remarkable transformation in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. The Council's military technology was converted to peaceful purposes. Enslaved populations were liberated and began rebuilding their worlds with assistance from former oppressors who had genuinely embraced change. Earth became the unofficial capital of what truly was now called the Galactic Freedom Alliance. Maya found herself serving as an ambassador to species whose names she could barely pronounce, translating not just languages but entire ways of thinking about science, relationships, and the meaning of civilization itself. Atlas returned to his people as a hero, but he never stayed away from Earth for long. The bond between him and Maya had become something legendary among both species, a perfect example of what was possible when beings chose trust over fear. On quiet evenings, when the demands of galactic diplomacy became overwhelming, Maya would retreat to the barn behind her grandmother's clinic. She'd work on new projects while Atlas lay beside her, both of them content in the knowledge that they had fundamentally changed the universe simply by being kind to each other. Dr. Sarah Chun, now serving as Earth's chief medical officer for interspecies relations, would often find them there. Her granddaughter building impossible devices that somehow worked, and alien war beasts who had chosen love over conquest. "Any regrets?" she asked Maya one evening as the girl put finishing touches on a new quantum communicator that would allow real-time translation between species who didn't even think in similar concepts. Maya looked up from her work, then at Atlas, who wagged his tail in the way that now carried meaning across dozens of worlds. "Only one," Maya said with a grin. "I should have started building bigger projects sooner." Above them, the night sky was filled with more lights than had been there a year ago. Ships from across the galaxy came and went freely, carrying diplomats, scientists, artists, and philosophers who were all working together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based not on conquest and fear, but on the revolutionary idea that different species could choose to be friends. It had all started with a girl who built impossible things, and a dog who had learned that kindness was the most powerful force in the universe. The weak warhorse aliens had overlooked more than just humanity's potential. They had failed to understand the most fundamental truth about intelligent life, that the capacity for love and friendship was not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength that could reshape the very foundations of civilization. And across the galaxy, on worlds that were rebuilding, healing, and learning to trust again, that lesson was being taught to new generations who would never know what it was like to live under the tyranny of those who mistook compassion for weakness. The universe had learned, finally, that the most dangerous thing you could possibly overlook was not a weapon or a technology, but a child who refused to accept that things had to stay the way they were, and a friend who was willing to help her prove it.